Mm. It's Friday. Today we are going to talk about a data warehouse. Yeah, so last week I had a question from Chimanje Patrick, and he was asking why a data lake, why use a data lake and not a normal database. So a data lake is a repository that you dump all types of data, all kind of data. For example, you can put there a Word document, you can put there a text document, you can put there a CSV, you can put there an Excel, you can put there video, you can put there audio, or you can put them all at the same time. So you can find that at a particular moment you have data from of a different type in a data lake. Yeah, and a database cannot do that. A database is more organized in rows and columns, and you can't keep all that information in the same database. Secondly, a data lake is meant to store data and used for analytics, store historical data. It is not fit for transactional kind of operations, but also a database is not fit for analytics because there is lots of queries that run from your database. So this is why we use data lake. Yeah, mostly it is because a data lake stores several files at the same time cheaply, and it stores files of different kinds. You don't need to define the schema. You can store data that you don't need currently, but you may need in the future. So that's the difference why people use data lake and not data warehouse and not database. But know that if you are developing a transactional kind of a system, you need a database, not a data lake. This week we are going to talk about a data warehouse. We are going to talk about what data warehouse is not. We are going to talk about what data warehouse is. We are going to talk about what are the benefits of a data warehouse, and then some architecture, looking at the architecture of the data warehouse. Then we will complete with what you should follow when you are designing the data warehouse. A data warehouse is not a database. It's funny, defining a data warehouse and studying by what it's not. Yeah. So let's see what is it not. A data warehouse is not a data lake. Data warehouse is not a database, and data warehouse is not a data mart. So a data warehouse is a type of a data management system that is designed to enable and support business intelligence and activities around analytics. It is solely intended to perform queries. It pulls data from several sources, just like what we talked about a data lake. It pulls data from all the departments in your organization, and maybe data from social media, data from your website, data from Google Analytics. It pulls it and puts it in a central storage. The difference between a data lake and a data warehouse is the data lake keeps data of several file formats. But for a data warehouse, the data is stored, data is structured in a data warehouse. You don't need to define the schema when you're writing data into the data lake. But for the data warehouse, you define the schema. You have to define whether the data you are entering into the data warehouse is an integer, whether it is a float, whether it is a date, whether it is a text, whether it is a variable character. But when you're entering data into the data lake, you don't define anything. You dump there a video, you dump there a Word document, you dump there an Excel file, you don't define. But for a data lake, you define the schema when you're reading it. You have to define the floats, the integers, the IDs when you're reading the data lake. But for a data warehouse, you define the schema when you're writing. As you define the data warehouse, new data periodically is added into the data warehouse by the departments. We find that accounting departments keeps on adding data into the data warehouse, provided the data warehouse is already defined, and also department for sales, department for communications, keep on adding the data periodically into the data warehouse. It was invented or concocted, I don't know whether it is invented or, but it came up from IBM. Some two researchers, they had a problem where there were several decision support systems that were using similar kind of data. So that data kept on replicating in different decision support systems that they were developing. And this was causing redundancy. And there was need to have a central place where the data is and it supports the decision support systems by then in 1988. And that is where the data warehouse came up to help them. It didn't just appear anyway. They're the ones who developed it to help them support the decision support systems without creating redundancy of the data. Yeah, so since then, the data warehouse has been improving till now where we have secured data warehouses that on cloud. So the data inside or within the data warehouse is gotten from several sources, or it can come from a data lake, where the data lake gets from several sources. Since data comes from several sources and it stays in one central source or central location for the organization considers a data warehouse as a central source of truth. But there are some organizations that have two central sources of truth. The first central source of truth is the central source of truth for raw data, which is mostly a data lake. And then the second central source of truth is the data warehouse, which contains clean data. So the data lake gets data from everywhere, dumped there. Then there is an extraction load process that cleans that data and loads it into a data warehouse. So there will be two central sources of truth for such kind of an organization. But mostly the data warehouse, for anyone who is not so technical, becomes the central source of truth for the whole organization. It has benefits in a way that all your data is in one place, data is integrated. So you can easily analyze the whole organization because you have everything in one place. You don't need to move from one place, follow a kind of bureaucracy and hierarchy to get data, because all the data is in one place. You can analyze your financials at the same time with your social media and see how social media is affecting your financials from a data warehouse. The data warehouse is non-volatile. That means that you can't lose your information as so long as it is in the data warehouse. And it is time variant, keeps lots of information, all your historical data. If your organization started in 2010, that means you have more than 10 years of data in your data warehouse, and you can use it to do analysis and make decisions faster. Apart from that, the data inside the data warehouse, it is clean. That means it is of a good quality, it is consistent, and it is accurate. The architecture for data warehouse is not that complicated, but there are different kinds of architectures that organizations use. There is a simple architecture where the data warehouse gets data from several sources, and then the data is persisted in the data warehouse. Then several users from the organization connect to the same data warehouse and use that data. That is a simple architecture. Then there is the next architecture, which includes a staging area. So this one I consider it as a simple architecture with a staging area. The staging area can be a data lake, it can be another data warehouse. So in the staging area, all the raw data is kept there. Then only clean data is kept in the data warehouse. And then the third one is hubs and spoke, where you have data marts. So you have a staging area, you have your data warehouse, which has clean data. Then you have data marts that you provide to the several users of your database. And these data marts, for example, if you want to give data to an accounting department, you give them their own data mart. They don't need to access the whole data warehouse. You give them their simple, because the data mart is a data warehouse on its own, but it is like a subset of a data warehouse. So a person does not get all the data for the organization, but they get data that is meant for them to access. For you to design a data warehouse, you need to determine why you need a data warehouse. You need to determine the business objectives and your key performance indicators. If, for example, you're a social media learning company and your key performance indicator is by people that you reach, then after defining the KPI, you specify the data that you're going to get. Then after that, you define the relationship of the data. For example, if it is data from social media and data for sales, there is a way this data is related. You can define it in the data warehouse. Then you define the environment for the data warehouse, which includes also security and access, and where you're going to host your data warehouse. Is it on-premise or is it going to be on cloud? And who is going to access the data and how are they going to access it? There are some sensitive data in your data warehouse. Are you going to provide it to everyone to access for analysis, or there is a specific group of people who can access that data warehouse? You need to define this in your architecture. Also, there is lots of transformation that happens in a data warehouse, which you also need to define. And as you're building a data warehouse, you need to also leave room for expansion. So the processes of the data warehouse, there are several processes. There is the extraction load process that we have been talking about. Then there is data cleaning. As you extract, you clean it. You clean it so that you can use it. You can't use all that junk. Then there is combination. Data comes from several sources. You combine them, put them together, and correct them. Do some bit of error correction. After that, you store it in a database format. When data is stored in the database format, there is some bit of consolidation, there is some bit of sorting and summarizing that happens in the data warehouse. So this is all I have for data warehouse this week. If you didn't watch the video about a data lake, there is a link in the description, or you can click on this card up here. I am building a community of data scientists and data engineers, and so far we have 30 members as those ones who have subscribed. So if you've learned something, I'll keep on posting every week. You can subscribe so that you join us as a member of the DALI Coders. And the DALI Coders are data engineers and the data scientists. Till next week.